Let me bring you up to speed on the latest news. Wednesday night at about 6 o'clock, I spoke at the Yavapai County Republican Precinct Committeeman meeting, and with a sigh of relief announced that the 5 o'clock deadline for being challenged on petitions had come and gone. And at that time I didn't know that we had been challenged, and so I said we hadn't been challenged. Lo and behold, we find out that at 4:16, Governor Ducey's somebody supporting his campaign, somebody that I'm sure gave $30,000 to file a lawsuit. They are challenging our petitions. Just to give you a little insight on how hard they are working to not have me on the ballot, which tells us a lot. Yeah. When your opponents really work hard to not even have you in the ring, that means that they don't want to fight. And this is David versus Goliath, or this is Buster Douglas versus Mike Tyson in Tokyo 1999, or whatever that was. This is the Miracle Mets, or the U.S. hockey team versus the Soviets in 1980. Whatever David Goliath story you want to equate this to, this is it. And I'm the David. But we know how that one turned out too. So, but when we started collecting signatures the last week in April, we only had 5 weeks to collect over 6,200 signatures. I went to 2 companies that have people that collect signatures. And one was going to collect me about 1,000 signatures. He said he thought he could get. Another one was going to collect me 3,000 maybe. 2 days after I had hired them to collect the signatures, Ducey sent 2 attorneys over to the first guy, and they had collected signatures for Ducey earlier in the year, but they were finished. They didn't need any more signatures, so they told him to stop collecting signatures. Well, they sent 2 attorneys over and said, you know, we never officially canceled the contract, so we threaten you with a lawsuit. You must stop collecting for Bennett, or we're going to sue you. So he stopped collecting. I understood that. Well, the other one, the other signature collection company, a nice lady out of Apache Junction, she had not done any work for Ducey, so they couldn't pull the contract thing. The same night that they threatened the lawsuit against the first company, they called her on the phone and offered her between $5,000 and $10,000 as a bribe if she would just stop collecting signatures for me. And she said, no, I like Ken Bennett, and I'm going to collect signatures. About 5 days later, they contacted her a second time and said, we'll pay you $6 per signature. The going rate was $3 per signature. We'll pay you $6 per signature if you'll stop collecting signatures for Ken Bennett and start collecting for us, even though they had plenty of signatures. She said, no, I'm with Ken, and we're going to do this. So they went to great lengths to even prevent me from getting the signatures to get on the ballot. Well, in a matter of 5 weeks, we collected almost 8,000 signatures. Yes, we used some paid circulators, the one company, but we collected almost 3,000 through volunteers in a matter of 5 weeks. It was unheard of. Nobody's ever collected that many signatures in 4 or 5 weeks. We filed them. We needed 6,200. We filed almost 8,000. As I said, we were hoping that Wednesday at 5 o'clock that there wouldn't be any lawsuits filed against us, but at the last minute they did. So they are stooping to any means. We're going to vigorously defend the lawsuit. I met with the attorney today. It's going to cost me $7,500 in retainer, and we're going to have to spend hours and hours between now and there's a hearing next Thursday. But we're going to vigorously defend the lawsuit, and we think that we're going to prevail eventually, and that he will rule that there are plenty of signatures and that these voters should not be disenfranchised. But this is the kind of lengths to which the governor is going to not have any competition. And I believe that people deserve a choice, and we're going to give them that choice. Now, why am I running? As Americans and Arizonans, we always want to make tomorrow better than yesterday. We want to provide a better life for our family, our loved ones, than even we enjoyed, because our parents and grandparents did the same for us. And we count on the promise that the things that we are doing are going to matter. And I have almost 30 years of public service, 35 years in the private sector. I believe we can make Arizona better than it is right now. Even though this is my home birth state and I love it to death, there are some things that are going on. And one of the reasons I'm running is because the truth matters. And in some very critical areas, we are not being told the truth. I'm very concerned, for example, how this last budget was suddenly put together, and I don't believe that we have a sustainable way to pay for the promises that the governor made. Do I want teachers to be better paid? Absolutely. But the governor is not the one that should be the teacher compensation board for every teacher in the state. Just last year, Governor Ducey was telling us that any new money that goes to K-12 education should be based on performance and merit, and the people that are doing a better job should be getting perhaps more raises than the people that aren't doing as good a job. And yet, a year later, because of the political pressure, remember he was saying that the Red for Ed movement was just political theater a few days before he...
And they were all out.
Yeah, and they were, you know, they were just engaged in political theater, and playing political games was one of his other things. And then 2 days later, he announces that we're going to give him a 20% raise over the next 3 years. Now, they just got the budget balanced last year. I was actually pleased that the governor and the legislature got the budget what's called structurally balanced, even though we're still using almost $1 billion of accounting tricks and gimmicks that have been used for the last decade. And I noticed that in the back door, some of you were being handed a flyer by somebody, I'm sure, supported by the governors. They won't, as required by law, put who's paying for this. But they're saying things like...
we saw it down in Phoenix.
Yeah, we saw this down in Phoenix. Bennett caved into rhinos, Republicans in name only, and rubber-stamped Democrat Janet Napolitano's big spending budgets that crashed our economy. I was Senate President from 2003 to 2007. And yes, my 4 years as Senate President was the first 4 years of Janet Napolitano as governor. Every year she wanted to spend any and every dollar she could find anywhere in state government, borrow it if necessary, transfer money out of this fund to pay for other things, and we kept her from doing that. And we rebuilt the rainy, there's another one here that says I raided the rainy day fund, and when I took over as the Senate President, there was $13 million in the rainy day fund. When I left 4 years later, there was $1.1 billion in the rainy day fund. And during those 4 years, we did the largest tax cuts in the history of the state of Arizona at that time. But we also put more new money into K-12 education during those 4 years than any other 4 years in the history of the state. We eliminated hundreds of millions of dollars of accounting tricks and gimmicks that both parties had used for decades. And we really got to a structurally balanced budget. And when I left, we had $1.1 billion in the state's rainy day fund. Well, I was replaced by a few other not quite as conservative or cautious Republicans. And the very next year, in 2008, she increased the spending by $1 billion a year, counting on the economy to just keep expanding in 2008 like it did in 5 and 6 and part of 7. Well, the recession hit, and within a matter of months, we went from having a structurally balanced budget to they wiped out the rainy day fund $1 billion in a matter of about 16 months and plunged the state. Now, Napolitano's last 2 budgets in 2008 and 2009 did what they said it did, put the state in the largest financial crisis. But it wasn't under Senate President Ken Bennett. It was under the next person that replaced me and others that voted with her to do that. So they're going to distort just about anything. You probably haven't heard, for example, that the total state debt. I saw a report that the governor was interviewed a few weeks ago, and he said, I'm all about paying down the debt that the state of Arizona has. So I went to what's called the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report that the state issues every year. Total state debt for the state of Arizona is $1 billion higher today than it was 4 years ago when he became the governor. After just getting the budget structurally balanced last year, now they've added $1 billion of new spending over the next 2 or 3 years, and the claim is that they didn't raise taxes, but they raised the vehicle license tax by over $150 million, more than necessary to pay for the Department of Public Safety, which it's going to supposedly was raised for, so that they can take excess money and put it in a pot over here to pay for part of the teacher salaries increase. They raised hospital prices and assessments by $55 million so that the state could free up about $25 million that they're going to use to pay for the teacher salaries. So why are we increasing healthcare costs on Arizonans by $55 million to come up with $25 million to help pay for the teacher salaries that they say was done without accounting tricks and gimmicks, when obviously it was. We were told a couple years ago that if we would pass Prop 123 that the governor championed to take more money out of the state land trust, we were told, in fact I was at a luncheon myself when I heard him live speak to us and say Prop 123 was going to put $350 million of new money, additional money, he said, into the K-12 school system every year. It's been about half of that. He knew when he made that statement that there was already a formula in state government. Prop 123 increased it by a little bit, but it wasn't all new money. If half of the new money that he said was going to go in to K-12 from Prop 123 had gone to teachers, like he promised most of it was going to go to teachers, there would have been enough money to give teachers a 6% raise each of the last 3 years. 6, 6, and 6 is 18. The Red for Ed folks were wanting 20% raises. If Prop 123 had performed the way that he promised it was going to, they would have gotten an 18% raise over the last 3 years, and we would have been that close to just finishing out with 1 or 2% to do the 20% raise. He also told us that the Prop 123 would not take any money out of the principal or the corpus of the state land trust. And yet in the very first year after they passed Prop 123, they took $170 million out of the principal of the land trust fund. That $170 million being gone now forever will cost the school districts $120 million every 10 years forever, because that money is not there to earn the interest that gets paid to the schools. So we can do better, I believe, than what we're doing now, and we're not being told the truth. A couple of years ago, right after when he passed his first budget, he said we're streamlining state government by getting rid of an entire state agency. It was the Department of Weights and Measures. I think, Mike, your dad was the director of the Department of Weights and Measures, and then he later got onto the Corporation Commission. But Governor Ducey announced we're going to streamline state government by getting rid of an entire state agency. I looked at the budget bill that got rid of the Department of Weights and Measures. They actually got rid of it by name, but they moved it over to the Department of Agriculture. The Department of Weights and Measures had a $3.1 million budget. When they moved it over to the Department of Agriculture, they increased the budget there by $4 million. So we saved $3 million by getting rid of the State Department of Weights and Measures, and then we put it over in the Department of Agriculture and increased their budget by $4 million. So I'm glad we didn't do too much streamlining of state government like that. You know, the day I was driving down to the Secretary of State's office, my old office, to file my petitions, I started hearing this news article on the radio that it's a done deal, that the Duceys and the McCains have agreed that when John McCain can no longer serve as the U.S. Senator, Ducey is going to appoint Cindy McCain to replace him.
No way.
Whoa, 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 whoa. So after we filed our petitions on Wednesday, we tweeted out on Thursday that if I'm the governor of the state, I will not appoint Cindy McCain to replace John. Now, I have respect for John and his military service and most of his public service. I did not like the thumbs down on repealing Obamacare after he had told us in 2016 that he was leading the fight to repeal Obamacare. But I have tremendous respect for John. I don't know if I should say Carl, but most of you have probably heard of Kayla Mueller, the girl that, this is Carl, her dad. Carl's first call after Kayla was captured was to me, because we had done some business together in our businesses. And I called John, and I called John McCain, and I called some others, and John was very helpful. over the ensuing year and a half to try to help in that family's terrible situation. And we were all devastated when she did not survive. But, so this is not about, I'm not attacking John McCain. I'm just simply saying, as a policy decision, if I were governor of the state of Arizona, I would not appoint Cindy McCain to replace John if he can no longer serve as U.S. Senator. I do not believe that U.S. Senate seats, I do not believe that U.S. Senate seats are family heirlooms that should be passed to family members. I just did not feel that if John is no longer able to serve, that appointment should go to Cindy. It really came down to the Obamacare vote.
Yeah.
Senator McCain told us for several weeks leading up to that vote that he was going to vote the way the governor of his state told him to vote. And he went on the floor and did the thumbs down. As he left the floor, he said, "That's what the governor of my state told me, and therefore I'm not interested in appointing somebody that's going to do that again." Ducey has told us that he opposes Obamacare, but then in another tweet just the same day, I think it was, said that he didn't like the bill and had in fact supported the thumbs down vote to repeal Obamacare. So if anything, what I believe we need from our elected leaders is openness, transparency, and honesty. And that's what I promise you. We're all individuals. We're never going to agree on everything. My wife and I have been married 36 years. I'm sure many that have been here married much longer than that. And we disagree on things. But so I might not do everything exactly the way each one of you might want to do it, but you're going to get the honest, transparent, open truth from me. And I'm going to work to make Arizona better. I'm going to work to get rid of things like Obamacare, which is, I think, going to bankrupt our country. Yes, we can find other ways to help people afford their health care and things like that, but if you knew the amount of federal money that's now pouring into the states that we're borrowing at the national level, it would blow your mind. Many of you have seen me explain the state budget using the boxes. When I first started doing that, the stack for education and the stack for health care were about the same height. Because of Obamacare and the tons of money, education has stayed here, health care is now doubled. And we are spending probably 3 to 4 times as much covering Americans, covering Arizonans on one type of government health care program or another than we would spend if we just bought them health insurance policies. And so, you know, I'm not working right now for a company that provides health insurance, so Gene and I had to go get private health insurance. And we did one of these Christian health sharing companies, and we covered the both of us for about less than $400 a month. Now, there's some pre-existing conditions, and we have to pay for those, but even if it's $500, $600 a month, under government health care programs, 1 out of 6 Arizonans is on a government health care program, and we're spending about $12,500 on average per person.
Per year.
Per year. So a couple under government health care, we're spending probably about $25,000 a year. In the private sector, we're spending $5,000 or $6,000 a year. So there's things that we can and must do. We need strong, steady leadership. We don't need, you know, we were told for 3 or 4 months that there's no way the state could afford to give a 20% raise to all the teachers. And now we're finding out that some districts are not giving the raises to the teachers. And there's a lot of people like Don's daughter, I think, who's a master's degree librarian, who's not going to get the teacher the raise because she doesn't happen to fit into the category of who gets the raises. The governor and the legislature are not the state teacher compensation board. The money goes to the school districts and they make those decisions at local levels. We've got the correctional officers that work in our state prisons, haven't had a raise in about 10 years. The last raise they got was when a guy named Ken Bennett was the state senate president. 100 of them are gathering in Tucson on Monday because they remember that the last time somebody looked out for the correctional officers that work in our state prisons was Senate President Ken Bennett in 2006 or 5 or 6, I think it was. So I have a proven record of working in private business, running our family businesses, and working in others. Also have a proven record, city council, state legislature, secretary of state, of helping to balance the state budget and eliminate the accounting tricks and gimmicks. Over the last 10 years, the state of Arizona has stolen, transferred, whatever you want to call it, about $1 billion from the funds that are supposed to be used to maintain our state highways and roadways and bridges to pay for other things that they just had to spend them on in the budget. And then we wonder why our roads and bridges are falling apart. So we need to be honest with the people of Arizona, and if we tell them we're going to collect money from gas taxes or diesel taxes and spend that money on roads, then we need to spend that money on roads. If we're going to collect money from the hospitals, we need to spend that money in the hospitals, not skim a little bit off and use it over in teachers' hours. If we're going to raise the vehicle license taxes, then we need to use that money to pay for the highway patrol department, not raise the taxes higher than necessary so that we can skim off a little money and use elsewhere. I want to make our education system in Arizona the very best in the country. And the teachers and other employees in our school system that can perform and make that happen, yes, I want them to be paid better than they are, but we're not going to try to dictate that in a panicked response to the political pressure of 40,000 people in red t-shirts standing at the state capitol.
It wasn't that many at all.
5 days ago.
It was 800.
It was a lot.
My daughter was there, and
I was there 2 days, and
I was in Tucson, and we filled all of Broadway.
yeah, it was a pretty good
Well,
show.
the Tucson people really.
Well,
It wasn't really.
I was one of them.
and I think it came down, frankly, I think it came down to people not trusting the governor. Because remember what he told us about Prop 123. $350 million of new money, most of it going to teachers. And if that had happened, the teachers would have received a 6% raise each of the last 3 years. They got 1.5, 1.4, and 1.3.
And we're still.
That's kind of an insult.
Okay. When they realized that they hadn't got what he had promised, he said, I'm going to take care of you in the next budget. You know what the next budget had? A 2% raise over 5 years. That's 0.4% increase a year. A teacher making $40,000, a 0.4% increase is $160 for the entire year. You divide that by 24 paychecks, it was like $1.86 a paycheck. So, with all due respect, I don't think they trusted him, given what they had heard and that what hadn't happened the last 2 or 3 years. And so they did the March on the Capitol. Don?
I believe Prop 123 also got the state out from the lawsuit that the school districts had won twice.
That's right.
And it was their bribe to get the school districts to drop the lawsuit.
Right.
And it was almost defeated, even though the proponents spent 8 times.
Oh, yeah.
There was another big.
Well, Jeff DeWitt, the former state treasurer,
He opposed it.
who has been very supportive of me, but he can't publicly endorse. He just took a position as the chief financial officer at NASA. But Jeff was the state treasurer. And the governor originally proposed that Prop 123 would raise the payments out of the trust fund to 10% every year. Whether the trust fund made, now if you go back the last 15 years, the trust fund's only made on average about 6.8 to 7, about 7%. So why you would set up, if you know that the long-term performance of money coming into the trust fund is about 7%, why would you set up 10% going out? And so DeWitt cautioned the governor that 10% was too much. The governor excoriated him in public and in private, threatened his livelihood, said that he would never be reelected, and on and on and on. But they did finally reduce it to about 7% a year. But even that has not produced the kind of money that he said it was going to. It was a bribe to settle the lawsuit, and yet it hasn't done what they were told it was going to do. And now we've taken $170 million out of the principal of the trust fund, and that's going to reduce the amount that the trust fund pays out over forever going forward. So
Red for Ed matched and asked for a bribe.
well, Red for Ed was political theater and political games until the pressure was too hot, and in order to try to appease them and get reelected this November, he caved in and went 180 degrees and said, look, we can do it a 20% raise, but we do not have a sustainable way of paying for it. If you've read Bob Robb in the Arizona Republic over the last few weeks, he, an independent analyst, and he's a pretty sharp guy, says that the budget is now back into a structural imbalance of $150 million a year, and over the next 2 years, if those other raise increases go in, the state budget will be structurally out of balance by $500 million, $500 million a year. So I believe we can do better, and I'm going to give the people a choice.